This video and other social media posts are for religious educational purposes only. No one involved in the social media pages or multimedia messages are lawyers, and nothing in this, or any other message or social media post, is to be taken as legal advice.
Alarambal jate vartor narvore. In the traditional Mandoa. In English, it means, welcome and good morning, my brothers and sisters. I am Udesla Jorir. I am the co-founder of the Way of The Mandalore Religious Movement. We are a registered domestic nonprofit in the state of Ohio and a legal 501c3 private charity. We hope that this video and the others help you to learn more about us and what we believe. In our previous sermon message, we addressed the 11th tenet, spread the way to those who will hear, where we discussed how Mandalorians are to share their faith with others outside the way. In this video, we will be addressing the last of the 12 core tenets of the Way of the Mandalore, Tenet 12, do not isolate. A Mandalorian must not separate themselves from their friends and loved ones in their effort to keep the way. A Mandalorian must do everything within their individual ability to maintain their relationships with friends and family outside the way. Now, this goes against the teachings of many other religions and religious sects, who demand that people must abandon large portions of their previous lives in order to become true believers. This can mean anything from refusing to speak to family members who do not share their religion, or turning their backs on their family obligations, or even selling off their worldly possessions and building isolated compounds away from what they consider to be the sinful influence of the outside world. This is not the way. Not to say that it is in violation of the way for keepers to voluntarily come together to live and train if they so desire. Nor does it mean that we should be encouraged to partake in anything and everything others choose to who are outside the way. It seems a bit cliche, but balance really is at the core of the 12th tenet. Or possibly a more accurate term would be discernment. As Mandalorians, we must be able to examine each individual situation and decide for ourselves what action or inaction would violate this tenet. If someone tells you that you should only associate with other Mandalorians, or that all, Arue to say, are Darmanda, meaning that all those outside the way are soulless and untrustworthy, that person is not to be listened to. Along the same vein, someone who spreads the idea that all Mandalorians must physically segregate themselves and make their own enclosed communities or communes in order to be untainted by the outside world is someone not to be trusted. Again, such behavior has been common within religious groups for thousands of years. So it's understandable that some would think that such a practice would be a natural progression for this religion. It isn't. This is a practice that scarcely ever produces a favorable result. Take, for example, the early Christian hermits and ascetics. While their intentions were often sincere, seeking spiritual growth through solitude, some fell into the trap of extreme isolation. And by isolating themselves from society entirely, they became disconnected from the real challenges and needs of their fellow human beings. This disconnection hindered their ability to offer support and guidance to those outside the community, which led, in turn, to a limited impact, and ultimately, the extinction of their sects. Though not specifically religious in nature, unless you count the worship of the state, In the city-state of Sparta, young boys were taken from their families at a tender age to undergo rigorous military training in the agoge. While this created a fiercely disciplined warrior class, it also led to a detachment from familial bonds and a lack of exposure to the broader spectrum of human existence. The Spartan society became insular, focusing solely on military prowess while neglecting many other aspects of human development. Similar practices exist even in our modern times. A more recent example is the Amish community, which practices strict religious isolation. The Amish reject modern technology and choose to live in isolated communities, separating themselves from the outside world. While their desire is to preserve their religious beliefs and culture, this isolation can lead to a limited understanding of the broader world and hinder personal growth and development. Additionally, the practices of some more modern religious groups, like certain Mormon and Jehovah's Witnesses sects, demand isolation from friends and family members who do not share their beliefs. Shunning and disfellowship are common practices in these communities, and those who leave on their own or who are expelled from the group often face being ostracized from their former social networks. This kind of isolation can have severe psychological effects, causing feelings of rejection, loneliness, and even depression. In this modern world, we see how social isolation can have detrimental effects on mental health and well-being, leading to increased stress, depression, and even a higher risk of premature death. And those are some of the more mild examples. This tenet is not meant as another aspect of how keepers of the way interact with those outside their faith. It is also a warning against those who would call for any form of cult isolationism. Religious isolation at those levels can foster extremist mentalities. When individuals become detached from those outside their belief system, and they only associate with those who parrot certain talking points, they can become vulnerable to manipulation by any number of extremist ideologies. This isolation creates an echo chamber where dangerous ideas are amplified and reinforced, which could lead to actions that violate the original religious teachings. This is something that we as keepers of the way must be wary of. That said, there are times and circumstances that will necessitate one to remove themselves from a particular group in a manner which does not violate the way. As Mandalorians, we must not isolate ourselves unless it becomes an issue of our safety or the safety of another innocent party. The beliefs of others must be respected, yes, provided the Mandalorian is not pressured to violate their faith. For obvious reasons, this part of the tenet does not apply to those who distance themselves from friends or family due to physical or psychological abuse. If a Mandalorian's family or friends are abusive in any way, they must feel free to leave that situation. And there is no shame or sin in cutting off abusive family members or friends. It is crucial to recognize that there are sometimes valid reasons for leaving a family or a social group for the benefit of one's own mental health. In situations of abuse, toxicity, or oppressive ideologies, individuals must prioritize their own well-being and safety. And leaving such environments is an act of courage and self-preservation. It allows individuals to find healthier, more supportive communities that foster growth and acceptance. This is not to say that a lack of understanding on their part is automatically abusive, or toxic, and is therefore grounds to cut ties. Some people are ignorant of the way, or they have a superficial understanding based on popular media or other influences. Obviously, this depends heavily on the individual situation, but remember, it is possible that their objections could be coming from a place of ignorance of the way rather than outright hostility. Try to help them understand, if you can, before you make the decision to cut them out of your life. There is one aspect of this tenet that is commonly overlooked, but it is not one that should be ignored in the larger theme. And that is, should one seek to leave the way for whatever reason, they must feel free to do so without fear of any sort of retribution. Individual freedom is central to the way, and that includes those who no longer wish to call themselves keepers. Those who choose to leave the way should set aside any of their arms and armor which bear the sigil of the way, though it is better to give or exchange them freely to someone who is a keeper of the way. And they must not claim any further association with the Way of the Mandalore. Joining or leaving a religion is not a decision to be taken lightly, but it is ultimately up to the individual which religious beliefs they choose to practice. Keepers of the way must take no hostile action against those who choose to leave the way. While those who leave may be referred to as an apostate, and that term is only meant to be a point of fact rather than an insult, their former brothers and sisters must never give them any reason to be in fear of their safety. And simply leaving the way is not a justification for any discrimination, and definitely not violence. They must feel free to pursue their own religious beliefs. And as keepers of the way, we must make sure that they do not fear any form of reprisal or repercussions just for doing so. By all means, seek to dissuade them if they are doing so due to misunderstandings or misinformation. But ultimately, we must respect their right to pursue their own religious beliefs. And should they choose to return to the way, they must be accepted without any anxiety or fear of mistreatment. In closing, as Mandalorians, we cherish our self-reliance and independence. But we must remember that our strength is best utilized within a voluntarily connected community. Our individual growth and fortitude serve to enhance the well-being and protection not just of ourselves, but of our fellow Mandalorians. We cannot forget the importance of family bonds and friendship, even beyond our Mandalorian brothers and sisters. Our loved ones can provide us with emotional support, guidance, and a sense of belonging that strengthen our resolve. And in times of challenge and hardship, the strength of our community can become a bulwark against isolation and despair. The dangers of isolation are real, on a personal and on a religious level. But by embracing and offering our support to others within our religion and without, we can create a powerful network that can withstand any adversity and goes to highlight the power of the Way of the Mandalore as a religion, and also demonstrates what it means to live as keepers of the way. And that concludes our initial sermon message series with a brief overview on the 12th and final core tenet of the Way of the Mandalore. Do not isolate. Hopefully this and the other videos helps you to learn more about this religious movement and what it means to be a keeper of the way. Please join us for our next video message, where we are planning on discussing frequently asked questions regarding our faith. You can submit your questions either in the comment section here or on any of our various social media platforms using this QR code or by clicking the link tree in the description. Until next time, Vore. Vorentje, Manduare, Balkuir, Marutje, Kibik Runi. Thank you, brothers and sisters, and be safe. This is the way.